y'all doing today?
Good.
Good. Happy to hear it. I'm First Mate Emily at the helm. We have the amazing Captain Bass. If you'll turn around, give him a smile and a wave, you might just get a free safe ride back to the dock. Here aboard the Aquabelle, we are a Coast Guard regulated vessel, so I do just have a couple of safety items to go over before we get headed on downriver. First, if you will, all please remain seated throughout the remainder of the ride. It will keep yourself safe and give our captain a clear view of the river. If you have kids with you by the railings, a great spot for them to sit so they can see through it and into the water. As long as they do remain seated and not kneeling or standing on benches during your lap. If there is a safe time to stand up for wildlife viewing today, we will let you know. Secondly, anything you'd like to bring back to the dock with you today, cell phones, cameras, keys, wallets, hats, sunglasses, children, friends, spouses, and siblings, please keep them inside the railings at all times. Anything that goes overboard will most likely not make it back to the dock with you today. And lastly, our adult life jackets are located here in these two big white bins on either side of me at the front of the boat. We have a third white bin of adult life jackets at the rear of the boat to the left of the helm. Our children's life jackets are located in those two black bags, also at the rear of the boat above the helm. In case of emergency, all passed-out life jackets will place them on over our head, wrap our strap around our waist, buckle in front and tighten. Then we'll all join hands and walk safely back to shore. The water here is only about 3 to 5 feet deep, so if our boat were to sink today, our feet probably wouldn't even get wet. Alright, let's get headed on downriver and see what we can find. Now, this year that we are on is the Weeki Wachee River, fed entirely by Weeki Wachee Spring. The river winds its way about 8 miles out to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, while the water here in the river is very shallow, up in the head spring where the mermaids perform, the spring goes down about 419 feet deep, where it connects it to our aquifer. That does make it the second deepest spring in North America. Weeki Wachee is also a first magnitude spring, meaning it puts out over 100 million gallons of water every single day from our beautiful river. Sorry, from the aquifer to form this beautiful river. Now, to put that number into perspective, that would give every Florida resident about 7 glasses of water to drink each day. Now, the water here in the river comes out at about 72 to 74 degrees all year round. Anyone from up north will think that's a lovely ambient swim temperature, and anyone from down here will think it's freezing. Raise your hand if you think it's freezing. Those here folks are your locals. The rest of you can ask them for restaurant recommendations on your way out. Now, our river here does also get water quality tested on a regular basis, and it comes out of the head spring at 99.8% fresh pure water, with that 0.2 being trace minerals. So you could drink it if you wanted to, but after a busy day here at Buccaneer Bay, we wouldn't recommend that. Now, they do also test the visibility. Underneath the surface here, you can still see 111 feet. That just goes to show how pure and clean the water here really is. Now, it all gets out here and clean because, again, it comes out of the aquifer. That's the underground reservoir of water. Now, the water in the aquifer itself originates as rainwater falling from the sky, trickling down through all the layers of soil, which filter out its impurities. Now, new water being added into the aquifer will create pressure to push out the old water to form the river here. So the water here in the river could be anywhere from 2 days to 200 years old, and it all comes out of a vent about the size of the front door down at the bottom of that head spring.
We're about 5 miles.
That far down.
Yeah, Roger Park is 5.61 miles.
You ever been in it? See a diver?
Now, there's a couple different fish species we can look for as we head on downriver. All of those gray fish you'll see here below us and probably saw back at our dock. Those are mullet. Mullet are known for leaping up out of the water. They can jump up to 6 times in a row and at a distance of 10 to 12 feet. And there's a couple different reasons why they might be jumping. Some of them are just adrenaline junkies, but more realistically, they're leaping up to escape from a predator, get more oxygen, or another reason could be is that they are a bottom feeder. And sometimes they get things like algae stuck on their gills, so leaping up out of the water and slapping themselves back down will help to dislodge it, kind of like the equivalent of us blowing our noses.
Interesting.
We could also look for the sheepshead in the river today. The sheepshead are a black and white striped fish, and if you were to catch one and look at it, they might smile back at you, as they have a very funky human set like of teeth. A lot of people think it looks creepy, well, I think it looks pretty cool. Now, they use those teeth to grind up crustaceans and mollusks. That's their primary food source, so they're not really a threat or a danger to us, but I still wouldn't go sticking your finger in any of their mouths. We could also look for the needlefish in the river today. They're very long and skinny fish, and they move their bodies just like the eelgrass does, so oftentimes they'll blend right in. But if you look closely, you might be able to spot some. They can swim backwards, and they're some of the only fish to be able to do so, so it's a pretty unique characteristic. Now, coming up here to our left-hand side, we've got a couple of bald cypress trees. The bald cypress trees are a very slow-growing species, and they were almost cut down to extinction in the early 1900s. They're very useful due to their rot-resistant wood. Once it was determined that they're a slow-growing species, they were put into protection and have since rebounded. The first one growing up out of the water here is about 100 years old, and the second larger one here is about 400 years old. And those structures you'll see around its base, those are the cypress knees. The cypress knees help to provide stability to the tree, as well as providing oxygen to the rest of the roots. We have some cypress trees here in the park that are about 600 years old. Now, there's a couple different birds and bird nests up in the stand of slosh vines in front of us that we can look for. Off to the left-hand side is where we'll find our bright blue herring nest. Then off to the right-hand side, see that hairy tree count 3 trees back. Up there is where we'll find our resident bald eagle's nest. As we go by, you folks on the right or side, the left side of the boat, where we've got to get a good view. We'll spin around and I'll point it all out again. So you folks on the right side of the boat. Our resident bald eagles here are nicknamed George and Martha, and they've been coming to the park for about 18 years to nest and lay their eggs. That nest up there is about 3 years old. Their other one was knocked down in a storm a couple years ago. They did since rebuild. Now, earlier, back in January, George and Martha did hatch their very own pair of eaglets. They fledged the nest in about March. Now, bald eagles are a migratory species. They come down here in the winter months to nest and lay their eggs, and in the north, or in the summertime they go back up north. They go their own separate ways, and as they mate for life, it might just be the key to a healthy marriage.
Oh, do you see it jump?
Now, just a couple days ago, George did make his return to the nest up there. So keep an eye out in the sky. He could be anywhere. Now, he comes back down first to do his annual renovations on the nest and make it a tidy place for Martha to lay her eggs when she returns. There goes one. Now, as we pass by the island here on our right, on either side of us, you'll see some sawgrass. Now, sawgrass gets its name because it is very sharp along the edges and it will cut you if you grab a hold of it. Now, around the base, you might see some small white clusters. Those clumps are apple snail eggs. The snails will come up out of the water, lay their eggs on the grass, then when they're ready to hatch, they'll drop back into the water and become food for some of our native wading birds that we have here. Just like the white ibis or the limpkin, when we see them foraging around, we like to say that they're bobbing for apple snails. And then out of the top, you might see some taller brown stalks coming out. Now those are the blooms of the sawgrass, and the several people used to use those as an indicator of big wind season, aka hurricane season, which lasts from about June 1st through November 1st and coincides with the length of the blooms. So the several people knew that when they saw those, it was time to be prepared for storms. That side of the river, kayakers! Now these trees up in front of us, again off to our right hand side, are those bald cypress trees, and you'll see all of their green needles hanging off of them right now. But for a large portion of the year, they do drop all of their needles into the water, hence the name bald. Some of what you'll see hanging off of the trees right now is also Spanish moss, which is neither Spanish nor moss. It's simply a flowering plant in the bromeliad family, which includes other plants such as the pineapple and the orchids. Yep. Now, all of this grass you'll see here below us along the bottom of the riverbed, this is eelgrass. Eelgrass is a keystone species here in our spring ecosystem, so it's very important for a couple of different reasons. It helps prevent erosion in a river, supplies oxygen to the river, creates refuge for small fish, and it also provides food for the manatees. Now, the manatees come up out of the Gulf and into our spring here anytime between about November and March, whenever that Gulf water temperature drops below about 70. The manatees themselves need at least 68 degrees of water temperature, and like I said here, all year round in our spring, it's about 72 to 74 degrees. So it's perfectly a comfortable temperature for them in here all year round, especially during those colder winter months. Now, manatees can grow up to over 1,000 pounds and eat about 10% of their body weight per day, meaning they could eat about 100 pounds of eelgrass every single day. That's quite a lot of grass. So now you can see why it's so important to preserve its presence here in our ecosystem. Now, if you were to take a trip downriver, as you travel further and further away from the head spring, you'll start to see less and less eelgrass. Unfortunately, that is the sign of a deteriorating ecosystem due to overuse. So recently they've put into effect the Springs Protection Zone, which extends 5.61 miles from the head spring all the way down to Rogers Park, and that bans anchoring, grounding, mooring, or beaching of any type of vessel alongside either edge of the riverbank. And that is to prevent further erosion and shrimp-like eelgrass and allow it to regrow and keep our beautiful ecosystem here healthy and thriving for generations to come. That's also why the entirety of the river is a no-wake zone. That's also to prevent further erosion in the river as well. If you create that wake, it'll wash up onto the shore of those waves as well and create erosion, and then plants will come down off the riverbank, and it's just a cycle, and it keeps on going. So if you are planning to make a trip downriver, just make sure to read up on all those river rules beforehand. They are in the best interest of protecting this river from here on out, and make sure to abide by them as you go along. Now, come off here to our left-hand side is Parker's Landing. Parker's Landing is part of our Springs Coast Environmental Education Center, where students from around Hernando County can come and learn about the springs and environment. Now, on that board back there, you'll see some of our native birds of prey, and those are accurate wingspans, with the eagle being up to 8 feet.
Copy that, Ruben. On there.
Now, what about Florida's other most iconic animal, the American alligator? Well, just like in any Florida puddle of water, they could be here. However, our spring is a little cold, a little fast-moving, and very, very clear. Now, alligators are an ambush predator, and they like swampier, murkier waters, where they can hide when they're afraid to come to them. Here in our beautifully clear water, they wouldn't really be able to do that too well, from 111 feet of visibility. So we don't see them very often. Oh, there is a yellow-bellied slider swimming in water off to our right-hand side here. And you just pop up to the surface, keep your eye out, and I see some more. Now, our river here is also a very popular place for us humans to come visit, and they are, in fact, alligators' biggest fear. So, once they see how many of us hang out here, they don't really like to stick around. from here. All of this very, very fresh water mixes with the salt water from the Gulf to become brackish. Down there is a tidal influence on the river. Up here, not so much. But coming off to our right-hand side is going to be a great spot for those sheep's head. Again, they are the black and white striped fish. They like to hang out all along the bottom of the river back here in a sandy area underneath all the sticks. Both the sheep's head and the mullet are actually salt water fish, but they use a process called uree-haling to travel between the two water types and tolerate a wide range of salinities. If you just want to paddle off to one side, thank you, folks. If you'll paddle off to the side of the river, folks, thank you. Now, the lighter fish have more recently spent a lot of time here in the spring, and the darker fish have more recently spent a lot of time out in the Gulf. So they're not different fish. They've just been in different places. We do get a handful of other saltwater fish up here in our freshwater spring as well. That would include jack crevalle, snook, and gar. Those are all fish that possess that same uree-haling ability. As for freshwater fish, we mostly see largemouth bass and a variety of different sunfish, including the bluegill, the red-eared, and the red-breasted sunfish. Now, along with the yellow-bellied sliders I saw earlier, we also see red-bellied sliders, alligator snapping turtles, and soft-shell turtles. I know you didn't see any more of those out here today, but if you did go to one of those mermaid shows, remember the mermaids do perform directly out in the open above the head spring. So you'll be sure to see lots more wildlife like other fish and turtles in there with the mermaids today. There is a soft-shell turtle. He looks like a big brown pancake in the water that likes to join the show so often that they have affectionately nicknamed him Frankenstein. And again, if you do see any more turtles with a darker back and later in the belly, that's probably the spider. And I also like to tell people to look out for the gar from the mermaid here. Now they're pretty lanky fish. They've got long pointy snouts. They're pretty distinctive from the rest of the fish up there. And there's usually at least 2 or 3 of them swimming around with those mermaids. This mermaid shows will be at 1:30 and from 3 o'clock today. So if you did want to catch that 1:31, I would head straight on up there. Typically they do close the doors. Right on time. Oh, there is an hinga. And off to our right here in the water. And hingas are a water bird. They like to spend a lot of their time during the day underwater fishing, just like he's doing now. Once they're done fishing, they'll come back up out of the water, perch on the low-hanging branches, usually spread out their wings to drown. Unlike other water birds, they don't have too much oil on their feathers, and they get quite waterlogged during their dives. They're pretty closely related to the cormorant, basically like their saltwater cousin. Now again, they do open the doors half an hour before each mermaid show, so if you don't catch this one, you can miss it. It's not pretty fun. And the breeder experience will be at 2:15, and Buccaneer Bay will be open for swimming till 5 p.m. today, Wednesday. Now, as we come back to the dock, I will just ask that you do all please remain fully seated so we're safely tied up and have no pecking. If you're on the right side of the boat, just make sure you keep your hands off the elbows, fully inside and off the railing. So not until you brush up against the dock, I would want you to take on the souvenir and watch the sprinter go.